A mafia boss thought control could protect everyone, until tragedy turned his twin daughters into tiny soldiers who refused to feel. No nanny could survive them. No method could break through their armor. But the day he stood watching from his study and saw his maid doing this in the garden, everything he knew about power, connection, and what truly keeps a family safe was turned upside down forever. After losing their mother to violence, the twins became forces of chaos, dismantling every caregiver who entered their fortress. Their father, Tae, wrapped his grief in ink and tailored suits, certain that discipline and distance were the only ways to keep them safe in his dangerous world. Then Jessica Williams walked through his gates, a woman with no weapons, no fear training, only soul food, lullabies, and a stubborn belief that even the smallest hearts can heal. What started as a high-risk job in a mansion of secrets slowly became something far more dangerous. A journey that would melt two frozen children, crack open a guarded kingpin, and prove that the most powerful empire is built on love, not fear. Welcome to the channel. You're about to hear a story that reminds us why love, patience, and hope still matter. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share the story with someone who needs hope today. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that truly need them. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And now, let's go straight into the story. Jessica's fingers trembled as she folded the acceptance letter and tucked it into her worn leather purse. The pay was almost obscene, 3 times what any normal household would offer, with housing included. Her grandmother had gripped her hand that morning, eyes clouded with worry, and whispered a prayer that felt more like a warning. Baby, some doors open to palaces. Others open to cages. The black sedan that arrived to collect her didn't have a logo. No cheerful company name painted on the side. No friendly driver making small talk about the weather. Just tinted windows so dark she couldn't see who sat behind the wheel until the rear door swung open with mechanical precision. The man who stepped out wore an earpiece and an expression that suggested he'd seen things that would make grown men weep. Miss Williams. His voice was clipped, professional. Your belongings. She gestured to the single duffel bag at her feet, suddenly embarrassed by how little she owned. He didn't blink, just loaded it into the trunk with the same efficiency he might handle a briefcase full of cash. The neighborhood kids watched from Mrs. Chen's stoop, their eyes wide. Jessica had babysat half of them. Now she was leaving for somewhere they only saw in movies. The drive took 40 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another country. Her neighborhood's cracked sidewalks and corner stores gave way to manicured lawns that looked painted on, then to roads lined with trees so perfect they seemed like centuries. The houses grew larger, more distant from each other, as if wealth required space to breathe. Then the sedan slowed at gates that belonged in a thriller film. 12 feet of wrought iron and steel, cameras perched like hawks at every angle. 2 men in dark suits stood at attention as the gate rolled open with a whisper of expensive machinery. Jessica's throat went dry. The mansion emerged from a tunnel of manicured hedges like a vision. All sharp angles and massive glass panels that reflected the sky. It was beautiful the way a knife is beautiful. Dangerous. Deliberate. The kind of home that didn't invite guests so much as allow them entry. The car stopped beneath a portico where another man waited, older than the driver, with silver threading through his dark hair. His suit probably cost more than her entire year's rent. Miss Williams. I'm Mr. Kong, the house manager. His bow was slight, measured. Master Y is currently in a meeting. I'll show you to your quarters and review the household protocols. Protocols. Not rules. Not guidelines. Protocols. She followed him through doors that opened without a sound, across marble floors that gleamed like ice. The interior was all clean lines and muted colors. Grays, blacks, whites. No family photos on the walls. No toys scattered across the floor. Just expensive art that looked like it belonged in a museum, and silence so thick it felt like walking through water. The twins' wing is on the 2nd floor, Mr. Kong explained, his shoes clicking a steady rhythm. Your room adjoins theirs. You'll find a complete dossier on their routines, dietary restrictions, and behavioral patterns. Master Y expects strict adherence to the schedule. Jessica's pulse quickened. Behavioral patterns. They were talking about children like they were classified documents. The girls are currently with the occupational therapist. You'll meet them at 1600 hours. He paused at a door, producing a key card. Some additional context, Miss Williams. You are the fourth nanny in 6 months. Master Y's patience is not infinite. The door opened to a bedroom larger than her grandmother's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that could host a wedding. The bed looked like it had never been slept in. Jessica set down her duffel bag on sheets that probably had a higher thread count than she had brain cells, and wondered what exactly she'd just walked into. Outside, through the spotless glass, she could see the estate stretching toward distant walls. Beautiful. Sterile. And somewhere in this marble fortress, 2 little girls who'd forgotten how to smile. The twins' playroom looked like a showroom floor, every toy organized by size and color, educational materials stacked with military precision, not a crayon out of place. Isabella and Gabriella sat at opposite ends of a pristine white table, silent as statues, coloring inside lines that had probably been drawn by someone else. They were beautiful, with their father's sharp features softened into something delicate, heartbreaking. 4 years old, and already they'd learned to make themselves small. Jessica knelt slowly, keeping her movements gentle. Hi, sweethearts. My name's Jessica, but you can call me. They will call you Miss Williams. The voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. She turned, and every instinct in her body screamed danger. Waite stood in the doorway, and he was nothing like the grainy photo in the dossier. The camera had failed to capture the way he occupied space, the quiet menace that radiated from him like heat. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to a frame that suggested he could break someone in half without wrinkling the fabric. But it was the tattoos that made her breath catch, intricate ink crawling up from his collar, threading across his neck like dark vines, disappearing into his hairline. More patterns emerged from his cuffs, covering his hands in designs that probably had meanings she didn't want to know. His jaw could have been carved from stone. His eyes were darker. Master Y. Mr. Kong appeared behind him like a shadow. Miss Williams was just introducing herself to the children. I can see that. Waite's gaze moved over Jessica with the cool assessment of someone evaluating a purchase. You're younger than I expected. Jessica stood, forcing her spine straight. I'm 24, sir. My references are adequate or you wouldn't be here. He stepped into the room, and both twins went rigid. Not afraid, exactly. Conditioned. Mr. Kong has provided the schedule? Yes, sir. Then you understand that deviation is not acceptable. The girls wake at 7. Breakfast is at 7:30. Educational activities from 9 to 11. Lunch at noon. Quiet time until 2. Supervised play until 4. Dinner at 6. Bed at 8. No exceptions. Jessica glanced at the twins. Isabella had stopped coloring. Gabriella was gripping her crayon so hard her knuckles had gone white. That's quite structured for 4-year-olds, Jessica said carefully. Waite's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Structure is what they need. Consistency. Routine. The previous nannies failed because they tried to coddle them. My daughters don't need coddling. They need discipline. With respect, Mr. Y, they're children. They need. I didn't hire you to tell me what my children need. His voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. I hired you to follow instructions. The girls are to remain inside the house unless accompanied by security. They do not leave the grounds. They do not interact with unauthorized individuals. Their meals are prepared by the house chef according to nutritionist-approved menus. Is this clear? Jessica's mouth went dry, but she nodded. Crystal. Good. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Miss Williams. My daughters have difficulties, nightmares, behavioral episodes. The last nanny quit after Isabella threw a lamp at her head. If you find yourself unable to manage them, you leave quietly. No drama. No complaints to social workers or journalists or anyone else who might find our family situation interesting. You simply pack your bag and go. Understood. Understood. He left without another word, Mr. Kong trailing after him like a well-trained dog. The room felt bigger in his absence, but colder too. Jessica looked back at the twins. They'd both resumed coloring, mechanical and precise, like tiny robots programmed to perform normalcy. Isabella's picture was a house. All black, no windows. Gabriella's was a garden. No flowers, just empty stems. Jessica sat down between them, her heart aching. This wasn't a home. It was a mausoleum. And these babies weren't living, they were surviving. She'd been hired to maintain order in a beautiful prison. But maybe, just maybe, she could teach them how to break out. The screaming started at 2:47 a.m. Jessica bolted upright in the unfamiliar bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sound was primal, desperate, the kind of crying that came from somewhere deeper than sadness. She grabbed her robe and rushed through the adjoining door into the twins' room. Isabella stood on her bed, face red and streaked with tears, hurling stuffed animals across the room with shocking force. A lamp lay shattered on the floor. Gabriella had wedged herself into the corner between her dresser and the wall, rocking back and forth, hands clamped over her ears. Hey, it's okay, Jessica started forward, but a teddy bear sailed past her head and slammed into the wall. Go away. Isabella's voice cracked. Go away, go away, go away. Jessica froze. Every instinct screamed to rush in, to grab the child, to force comfort on her. But she'd seen this before. Grief that looked like rage, fear that wore anger like armor. Her own baby brother had done the same thing after their mama died. So instead of advancing, Jessica sat down on the floor. Right there in the doorway in her thin cotton robe on the cold hardwood. And she started to hum. Low and soft, barely more than a breath. An old hymn her grandmother used to sing, the one about troubled waters and weary souls. She didn't look at Isabella, didn't try to make eye contact with Gabriella, just closed her eyes and let the melody fill the space between them. Isabella threw another stuffed animal. It bounced off Jessica's shoulder. She kept humming. I said, go away. Jessica opened her eyes but kept her voice steady, gentle. I hear you, baby. But I'm not going anywhere. You can throw every toy in this room if you need to. I'll still be right here. You're lying. Everyone leaves. Everyone goes away. Isabella's voice broke into sobs, and suddenly she looked exactly like what she was, a tiny girl drowning in loss too big for her body to hold. Jessica's throat tightened, but she kept her melody going, adding words now. Soft and low. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Isabella's throwing slowed. She stood on the bed, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. Jessica kept singing, pouring every ounce of warmth she had into the words. The song her grandmother sang over every hurt, every nightmare, every moment when the world felt too heavy. She let it wrap around the room like a blanket, like arms that wouldn't let go. Gabriella's rocking slowed. Her hands lowered from her ears. My grandmama used to sing this to me, Jessica said between verses, her voice barely above a whisper. When I was scared. When I missed my mama. When I thought the sadness would swallow me whole. She met Isabella's eyes. You know what she told me. She said it's okay to be angry. It's okay to throw things. It's okay to scream at God and the world and everyone who left. Because the people who really love you, they stay anyway. Isabella's lip trembled. You don't love us. You don't even know us. You're right. I don't know you yet. Jessica's voice cracked. But I'd like to. If you'll let me. The silence stretched long enough that Jessica thought she'd lost them. Then Gabriella emerged from her corner, tiny feet padding across the floor. She didn't come to Jessica. She climbed onto her sister's bed and wrapped her arms around Isabella's waist. Isabella collapsed into her twin, and they cried together, holding each other like survivors of a shipwreck. Jessica kept singing, verse after verse, until her voice grew hoarse. Until Isabella's sobs faded to hiccups. Until Gabriella's breathing evened out into something close to sleep. She sang until both girls crawled under their covers, still holding hands across the space between their beds. She sang until their eyes drifted closed. And even then, she stayed on that floor, humming softly, keeping watch over two broken hearts that maybe, just maybe, were starting to believe someone might stay. Don't blink. Subscribe, comment your country. Then watch what happens next. You're not ready. The third morning, Jessica woke to find both twins sitting at the foot of her bed, silent as ghosts, just watching her sleep. Progress, she told herself. Terrifying progress. By day 5, they'd started eating breakfast without being prompted. By day 7, Gabriella whispered "Good morning," so quietly Jessica almost missed it. By day 9, Isabella let Jessica braid her hair without flinching. But they still moved through the house like prisoners on supervised release. Cautious, contained, never raising their voices above a whisper. The playroom remained pristine. The toys remained untouched except during designated, supervised play hours. And every time Jessica looked out the massive windows at the sprawling grounds beyond, she saw the same thing, a garden going to waste while two little girls withered indoors. On day 10, Jessica made a decision that would either get her fired or change everything. She found Mr. Kong in his office, reviewing security footage with the intensity of a man hunting for threats. "I need to take the girls outside this afternoon." He didn't look up from his screens. The schedule indicates indoor educational activities from 2 to 4. The schedule is suffocating them. Jessica kept her voice level. They need sunshine, fresh air, space to actually be children. Master Y's instructions were explicit. The girls remain indoors unless accompanied by security. I know. So send someone with us. She leaned against his doorframe, refusing to back down. Or you can explain to Mr. Y why his daughters are turning into beautiful little robots who forgot how to play. Mr. Kang's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd call Wai-Tae immediately, have her escorted off the property within the hour. Instead, he pressed a button on his desk. "Chen, accompany Miss Williams and the children to the South Garden. Stay within visual range." Jessica's heart leapt. "Thank you. Don't make me regret this, Miss Williams." An hour later, Jessica stood in the grass behind the mansion, watching two little girls approach a bright blue kiddie pool like it might explode. She'd filled it with the garden hose while Chen, the security guard, watched from a respectful distance, hand never far from whatever weapon he carried beneath his jacket. "It's just water, sweethearts," Jessica said, already rolling up her uniform sleeves. "Nothing scary about water." Isabella touched the edge with one finger. "We're not supposed to get dirty." "Says who?" "Mr. Kong. Father. Everyone." Gabriella's voice was small. Jessica knelt beside the pool, letting her hands trail through the cool water. "You know what I think. I think sometimes rules are meant to keep us safe, but sometimes they keep us from living. And you two have been so good, so careful, so perfect for so long." She looked at them, really looked at them. "Don't you ever just want to splash?" Isabella's eyes widened like Jessica had suggested robbing a bank. "I'll go first." Jessica cupped water in her palms and let it cascade back into the pool, the sound musical in the quiet garden. Then she flicked a tiny spray toward Gabriella. The droplets caught the sunlight, turning into diamonds in the air. Gabriella gasped. Then, impossibly, she giggled. It was the smallest sound, barely more than a breath. But it cracked something open in the afternoon, like light breaking through storm clouds. Isabella stared at her sister, at Jessica, at the pool. Then, moving like she was committing an act of rebellion that would echo through history, she stepped into the water. Her face transformed. Eyes wide with wonder, she stomped her feet, sending up splashes that caught the sun. Gabriella squealed and jumped in beside her, and suddenly both girls were laughing, really laughing, as water flew everywhere. Jessica grabbed the hose, setting it to a gentle spray, and the twins shrieked with delight as cool water arced over them in rainbow patterns. She didn't notice the figure watching from the study window. Didn't see Wai-Tae standing motionless, one hand pressed against the glass, his expression unreadable. Didn't know that for the first time in 18 months, he was seeing his daughter smile. Subscribe real quick, tell me where you're watching from, and get ready. because the next 5 seconds will shock you. Jessica was mid-spray, the garden hose creating a perfect arc of water over the squealing twins, when she felt it, that electric shift in the air that meant someone dangerous had entered the space. She turned, and her stomach dropped. Whitey stood 10 feet away, still in his tailored suit, his expression carved from granite. Behind him, Mr. Kong looked like a man witnessing his own execution. The laughter died instantly. Isabella and Gabriella froze in the pool, water dripping from their hair, their joy evaporating like mist in sunlight. They knew that posture, that silence. They'd learned to read their father's moods the way small animals learn to sense predators. Jessica lowered the hose, her pulse thundering. "Mr. Y, I can explain. You deliberately violated a direct order." His voice was quiet, lethal. "Yes, sir. I did." She refused to look away, even as her hands trembled. "Because your daughters needed this more than they needed another hour of flashcards." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that she wasn't backing down. "You've been here less than 2 weeks, and you believe you know what my children need better than I do? I believe I know what all children need. Sunshine, play, permission to be messy and loud and 4 years old." Jessica gestured to the twins, who stood motionless in ankle-deep water, their earlier joy now a ghost. "Look at them, Mr. Y. Really look. When was the last time you saw them smile?" His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking beneath the ink on his neck. "Pack your things. Mr. Kong will arrange transportation back to—" "Daddy, no." Everyone froze. Isabella had spoken. Isabella, who hadn't called him Daddy since the funeral, who barely spoke to him at all anymore. She stood in the pool, tiny fists clenched, water streaming down her face. Whether from the hose or tears, Jessica couldn't tell. "Please don't make her go away," Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. "Please. She sings to us. She stays when we're scary. She doesn't leave." Whitey stared at his daughter like she'd spoken in a foreign language. His hand, covered in intricate tattoos that probably represented deaths and deals and darkness Jessica couldn't imagine, flexed once at his side. Gabriella moved closer to her sister, finding her voice too. "We like her, Daddy. We like Jessica." The silence stretched so long Jessica could hear her own heartbeat. Whitey's expression remained unreadable, but something had shifted in his eyes, some fortress wall developing a crack. "How long have they been out here?" His question was directed at Mr. Kong. 37 minutes, sir." "And the security concerns?" Chen maintained visual contact. The perimeter was secure. Whitey looked at the pool, at his daughters, at Jessica, still holding the garden hose like a weapon she had no idea how to use. Then he did something that made the entire world tilt sideways. He walked forward, each step measured, until he stood at the edge of the plastic kiddie pool. "Isabella. Gabriella." His voice had softened, just barely. "Show me what you were doing." The twins glanced at each other, uncertain. Then Isabella, brave in a way that made Jessica's chest ache, stomped her foot in the water. A small splash hit Whitey's perfectly polished shoes. Jessica braced for the explosion. Instead, Whitey crouched down, balanced on the balls of his feet, his expensive suit jacket pulling across his shoulders. He reached into the water with both hands, tattoos stark against his skin, and sent a deliberate splash toward Gabriella. The little girl gasped, then giggled, then splashed him back. And Whitey, the cold-hearted mafia boss, the man wrapped in ink and violence and grief, smiled. It was small, tentative, like a muscle he'd forgotten how to use. But it reached his eyes, crinkling the corners, and for just a moment he looked like what he was, a father who'd lost his way home. Isabella launched herself at him, soaking his suit, and he caught her with reflexes honed by a dangerous life, pulling her close. Jessica turned away, giving them privacy, but not before she saw it. Whitey's eyes closing as he held his daughter, his throat working, his face finally cracking open. "Hold up, subscribe first. Then comment your location. Now brace yourself. This story is about to explode." The fever came on fast, the way childhood illnesses always do. One moment Gabriella was eating dinner, the next she was slumped in her chair, flushed and glassy-eyed. Jessica had her upstairs and in bed within minutes. Cool cloth on her forehead. Thermometer reading 103.2. Isabella hovered in the doorway, silent and terrified. Because fevers meant hospitals and hospitals meant the last time they saw their mother alive. "Mr. Kong, I need the house doctor. Now." Jessica kept her voice calm even as her heart raced. "He's been called. 20 minutes out." Mr. Kong appeared with a medical kit that looked equipped for field surgery. "Master Y has been notified. He's returning from Seoul." Gabriella whimpered, and Jessica's attention snapped back to the little girl burning up in her arms. "Hey, sweet baby, I've got you. You're going to be fine. Just a fever. Bodies do this sometimes. They fight off the bad stuff by getting hot." But Gabriella's eyes were unfocused, her breathing shallow, and Jessica had seen enough sick kids to know when to worry. The doctor arrived, examined Gabriella with efficient calm, and administered medication. Viral infection. Common in children. The fever should break by morning, but someone needs to monitor her through the night. Sponge baths every hour if it spikes above 103. "I'll stay with her," Jessica said immediately. "We both will." She turned to find Wai-tae in the doorway, his tie loosened, his jacket discarded somewhere between the front door and here. He looked disheveled in a way that made him seem more dangerous, not less, like a predator who dropped the pretense of civilization. The doctor left instructions and departed. Mr. Kong settled Isabella in Jessica's room with a tablet and headphones, keeping her close but separated from her sister's restless sleep. And then it was just Jessica and Wai-tae, sitting on opposite sides of Gabriella's bed, keeping vigil. The first hour passed in silence. Jessica changed the cool cloth on Gabriella's forehead. Wai-tae watched his daughter breathe like he was memorizing the rhythm. "She looks like her mother when she sleeps," he said finally, his voice rough. Same way of curling her hand near her face. Jessica glanced at him. What was she like? Their mother. Wai-tae's jaw tightened, and she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, stronger than me. Smarter, definitely. She was a prosecutor before. He stopped, the words catching somewhere in his throat. Before she made the mistake of loving someone like me. Someone like you. Someone whose enemies don't stop at business cards and lawyers. His eyes were fixed on Gabriella, but Jessica could see the guilt carved into every line of his face. She was killed because of what I am. Who I am. A message meant for me that she received instead. Jessica's breath caught. "Mr. Y, I'm so." "Don't." His voice cut sharp. "Don't offer sympathy I haven't earned." She'd be alive if she'd married the corporate lawyer her father wanted. Instead she got me, and 2 daughters who will grow up without her because I couldn't keep her safe. The silence settled heavy between them. Gabriella stirred, mumbling something incoherent, and Jessica dabbed her forehead with the cool cloth. "My mama died when I was 7, Jessica heard herself say. "Lupus. We couldn't afford the treatments that might have saved her. I used to think, if we'd just had more money, if we'd lived somewhere else, if God had listened to my prayers, she'd still be here." She looked at Wai-tae across the bed. "But grief doesn't do math, Mr. Y. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, powerful or powerless. Loss takes what it wants, and all we can do is figure out how to keep living afterward." Wai-tae's eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she saw past the tattoos and the tailored armor to the man underneath. Someone drowning in the same dark water she'd learned to swim 3 years ago. "How do you do it?" His voice was barely audible. "Keep living. Keep." He gestured vaguely at the room, at his daughter, at the ruins of his life. "Keep believing any of this matters." Jessica smiled softly. "You find someone who needs you more than you need to disappear. You sing when the silence gets too loud. You show up, even when showing up feels impossible." She reached across the bed, her hand stopping just short of his. "And sometimes, if you're really lucky, you realize you're not drowning alone anymore." His fingers moved, closing the distance she'd left, and they sat like that through the longest hours of night. 2 people from different worlds, holding vigil over a little girl who needed them both. Waite found himself doing something he never thought possible. Lurking in his own home. He'd always been a man who commanded space, who walked through doors knowing everyone would turn and take notice. But now, 3 weeks after the fever night, he stood in the shadows of the second-floor hallway like a teenager sneaking past curfew, watching through a cracked door as Jessica taught his daughters to braid each other's hair. "Okay, Isabella, you take 3 pieces, see? Like this. Over, under, over, under. You're making a pattern, baby. Just like the patterns we see everywhere. In music, in stories, in the garden." Isabella's tongue poked out in concentration as her small fingers worked through Gabriella's dark hair. It was messy, uneven, nothing like the perfect braids the previous stylist had created. But Gabriella was giggling, and Isabella looked proud, and Waite felt something crack open in his chest. He'd missed this. All of it. The small moments that made up a childhood. "Mr. Y." Mr. Kong appeared beside him, silent as always. "Your conference call with Tokyo begins in 10 minutes. Cancel it." Mr. Kang's eyebrows rose fractionally, the equivalent of shocked speechlessness from a man who'd mastered the art of revealing nothing. "Sir, this negotiation has been scheduled for 3 weeks. I said cancel it." Waite's voice was quiet but firm. "Tell them something came up. A family matter." He watched Mr. Kong process this, saw the moment his house manager realized something fundamental had shifted. The man who'd built an empire on never missing a meeting, never showing weakness, never putting anything above business, was choosing his daughters over Tokyo. "Yes, sir." Waite waited until Mr. Kong disappeared, then slipped further down the hallway to the playroom, where he could observe without being seen. This had become his new routine, rearranging his schedule to catch glimpses of his daughters actually living. He'd witnessed Jessica teaching them to make paper airplanes that flew crooked paths across the room. Watched her turn vegetables into faces at lunch, making them laugh until milk came out of Isabella's nose. Saw her let them paint her nails in colors that didn't match, treating it like an honor rather than an inconvenience. She was everything he wasn't. Patient where he was demanding. Gentle where he was harsh. Present where he'd been absent. And his daughters were blooming under her care like flowers finally given water. "Daddy." He jerked back from the doorway to find Isabella standing in the hallway, her braid half finished, looking at him with those eyes that saw too much. "I was just..." He had no excuse prepared. No explanation for why the master of this house was hiding in his own hallways. "Were you watching us?" No accusation in her voice. Just curiosity. Waite crouched down to her level, something he'd seen Jessica do 100 times now. "Yes. I wanted to see what you were learning." Isabella studied him with the seriousness of someone much older. "Jessica says you can come in if you want. You don't have to stand in the hallway like a stranger." The words hit harder than any business rival's threat. Like a stranger. In his own home. With his own children. Would you like that? If I came in?" Isabella considered this with the gravity of a judge delivering a verdict. Then she reached out and took his hand. His tattooed, blood-stained hand that had signed orders and ended disputes and done things she would hopefully never know about, and tugged him toward the room. "Jessica's teaching us to braid. She says Gabriella needs practice on someone patient. You could be patient, right?" Waite let himself be pulled into the bright room where Jessica sat cross-legged on the floor, Gabriella beside her, both of them looking up at his arrival. Jessica's expression was careful, welcoming but not pushy. She understood somehow that this was a threshold he needed to cross on his own. "Mr. Y." She smiled. "We're working on fine motor skills. Would you like to join us?" He looked at the scattered hair ties, the messy braids, the patient hands waiting to teach. Looked at his daughters, who were watching him with something he hadn't seen in their eyes since before the funeral. Hope. Waite loosened his tie and sat down on the floor. "Show me how," he said. Jessica found him in the garden at midnight, sitting on the edge of the empty kiddie pool, still in his dress shirt and slacks, staring at nothing. She'd come down for water and spotted him through the kitchen window, a solitary figure backlit by security lights, looking more alone than any person should ever look. Every instinct told her to leave him to his privacy. This was her employer, not her friend. A dangerous man who'd carved out an empire with his bare hands and kept the world at arm's length for good reason. But she'd also spent 6 weeks watching him learn to braid hair with fingers meant for signing contracts. Seen him sit through tea parties with more solemnity than he probably brought to actual business meetings. Heard him reading bedtime stories in a voice that stumbled over the silly parts because he was so desperately out of practice at being gentle. She grabbed 2 bottles of water from the fridge and walked out into the cool night air. He didn't look up when she approached, but his shoulders tensed, aware of her presence the way predators are always aware. She sat down beside him on the concrete edge, not too close, and set 1 bottle between them. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked quietly. "I don't sleep much anymore." His voice was rough, like he'd been sitting out here for hours. "Haven't since." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Jessica waited, giving him space to fill or leave empty. "Today was her birthday," Waite said finally. "My wife. She would have been 34. The girls asked me this morning if we could make a cake for Mommy, and his hands clenched on his knees. I told them we'd talk about it later and went to the office like a coward." Jessica's heart squeezed. "You're not a coward, Mr. Y. You don't know what I am." He turned to look at her then, and his eyes were devastated. "You see what I've been trying to become? This version of me that shows up and learns to braid hair and pretends I have any idea how to be what they need. But the truth is I'm terrified every moment of every day that I'm going to break them the way I break everything I touch." "You're not breaking them. You're learning them. There's a difference." "Is there?" His laugh was bitter. Their mother knew how to do this. How to make them feel safe and loved and seen. She could walk into a room and light it up. She knew when they needed space and when they needed holding. She was. His voice cracked. "She was everything I'm not. And now she's gone and I'm all they have, and I don't know how to be enough." Jessica set her water bottle down and turned to face him fully. "Mr. Y, can I tell you what I see when I watch you with your daughters?" He didn't respond, but he didn't look away either. "I see a man who canceled a meeting with Tokyo to watch his daughters learn to braid hair. I see a father who sits on the floor even though it ruins his expensive suits. I see someone who is showing up every single day, even when he's terrified because his children need him." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You're not trying to replace their mother. You can't. But you're learning to be present as their father, and that's what they need from you." Waite's jaw worked, his throat moving as he swallowed hard. "I don't know how to do this without her. How to navigate their emotions, their questions, their grief. How to be soft when everything in my world requires me to be hard. Then let me help you." The words came out before Jessica could stop them, but once they were in the air between them, she didn't take them back. Not as an employee. As someone who cares about them. About all of you. His eyes locked on hers, searching for something. Doubt, maybe, or pity, or the inevitable moment when she'd realize what she was signing up for and run. Instead, he seemed to find only steady certainty. "Why?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Why would you want to tie yourself to this? To us? To the danger and the darkness and all the ways this could end badly?" Jessica smiled softly. "Because Isabella makes me cards that say, 'Jessica is nice' in crayon. Because Gabriella holds my hand when we cross rooms. Because I've watched you become someone you didn't know you could be." She held his gaze. "And because nobody should have to find their way home alone." Waite's hand moved slowly, carefully, until it covered hers on the concrete between them. His palm was warm, his grip uncertain, like a man learning a language he'd never spoken. "Stay," he said. "Not as their nanny. As more. As family. Help me find my way back to them. Please." Jessica turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his tattooed ones. "I'm not going anywhere." "Wait, before I continue. Hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this next part is insane." The garden had been transformed, but not in the way Waite's world usually operated. No ostentatious displays of wealth, no imported flowers flown in from 3 continents, No guest list of people who mattered in the empire he'd built. Just white chairs arranged in a semicircle around an arch wrapped in jasmine, the scent sweet and simple in the afternoon air. Jessica stood at the far end of the makeshift aisle in a cream dress that cost a fraction of what Tae had tried to spend. She'd insisted, this wasn't about designer labels or impressing anyone. It was about promising forever to a man who'd forgotten how to believe in forevers, and to two little girls who needed to see that love could be chosen, not just lost. Isabella and Gabriella stood beside her in matching lavender dresses, holding baskets of petals they were supposed to scatter but were instead collecting like treasures. They'd been part of every decision. The flowers, the music, the cake flavor. This wasn't Jessica marrying into their family. This was all of them becoming something new together. Tae waited beneath the arch in a charcoal suit, his tattoos visible at his collar and wrists. No hiding what he was, not today. Mr. Kong stood beside him as best man, looking uncomfortable in the role of sentiment rather than security. A handful of others watched from the chairs, Jessica's grandmother, who'd wept the moment she saw the estate, a few of Tae's most trusted associates who'd been stunned into silence when they received invitations, and Father Marcus from the local parish, who'd agreed to officiate after Jessica convinced him that even mafia bosses deserved grace. The ceremony was simple. No grand speeches, no dramatic vows written by professionals. Just two people promising to show up for each other in a world that had tried its hardest to break them both. I can't promise you easy, Tae said, his voice steady but his hands trembling slightly as he held hers. I can't promise you safe. My world is complicated and dangerous, and there will be days when you question this choice. He paused, his eyes moving to his daughters, then back to Jessica. But I can promise that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you. Of them. Of this second chance at building something that matters more than power. Jessica's throat tightened. I don't need easy, and I stopped looking for safe a long time ago. I just need real. And this, she squeezed his hands. This is the most real thing I've ever felt. Father Marcus pronounced them married, and Tae kissed her like a man who'd forgotten how to be gentle, learning the motion all over again. The twins cheered, throwing their collected petals in every direction, and for a moment the garden was filled with lavender and laughter and light. The reception was small, held on the terrace overlooking the grounds. Jessica's grandmother told embarrassing childhood stories. Mr. Kong gave a toast so formal it was actually touching. The girls demanded their father dance with them, and Tae waltzed across the terrace with a daughter on each foot, looking more content than anyone had ever seen him. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Tae pulled Jessica aside to a quiet corner of the garden. His expression had shifted, something vulnerable breaking through the careful control he usually maintained. There's something I need to tell you, he said quietly. Something I should have told you before, but I was afraid. He stopped, his jaw clenching. The threat that took my wife. It's not gone. There are people who would still use my family against me. Marrying you puts a target on your back that wasn't there when you were just the nanny. Jessica's heart stuttered, but she kept her voice calm. I know what your world is, Tae. I've always known. Knowing and living it are different things. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. I'm asking you now before it's too late to turn back. Are you sure? Because once you're in this with me, truly in it, there's no safe exit. No walking away when it gets hard. Jessica looked past him to where Isabella and Gabriella were teaching her grandmother some elaborate hand-clapping game, their laughter carrying across the garden. She thought about the last 3 months. The midnight fevers and the hard conversations and the slow, painful work of healing a fractured family. She thought about Tae learning to braid hair with hands that had done terrible things, choosing tenderness over terror one day at a time. I'm already in it, she said simply. I was in it the moment those girls started calling me by my name. The moment you sat on the floor and asked me to help you find your way home. She rose on her toes, pressing her forehead to his. We're family now. For better or worse. And family doesn't run. Tae pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and she felt his shoulders shake, not with fear, but with relief so profound it had nowhere else to go. Thank you, he whispered. For staying. For believing we were worth the risk. Behind them, Gabriella's voice rang out clear and joyful. "Jessica! Daddy! Come play with us!" And as they turned to join the girls, this man wrapped in ink and danger, this woman armed with nothing but stubborn hope, and two little girls who'd learned to smile again, the garden seemed to glow brighter, as if even the sunset understood it was witnessing something rare. Not the building of an empire, the building of a home. If this story of transformation moved you, thank you for watching to the very end. We would love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments which part of Jessica and Waite's journey you loved the most. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your friends to help us spread more stories of love and healing. Until next time, stay patient and keep watching.